It's another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. But are you subscribed? If not, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Spread the word about the Christian Reeve Podcast and enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is a PhD student in educational psychology and a podcaster hailing all the way from Dallas, Texas. His name is Thomas Brooks. Welcome to the show, Thomas. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. What I'm going to say straight off the bat is talk us through your room right there, because I got to say, this was not what I was expecting. And you shouldn't have preconceived notions, assumptions in life. So I feel bad for even assuming. But I don't know, in my mind, I guess I just expected you to be in a suit or something. And then to see this, it's like, I don't know. It's a very cool vibe. I dig it. It's right up my alley. But just, yeah, disconnect there. Talk us through that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, no, I'm sure you were expecting some stuffy professor in his office with his fancy books behind him.
I knew that you were younger, obviously, because being a PhD student, being, yeah, but there was a little bit of an assumption on my part. So that's my mistake. But yeah, is this just like personal style, or is there a bit more to it than that, or does it relate in some way to your work, or is it just style?
I would say that. So the funny thing is, and I'm going to kind of tie this to the COVID-19 stuff we're going through right now, is that PhD students have been socially distancing way before it was cool. And so I spend way too much time in this room. This is primarily where I live. So it's always super important to me to be in a space that promotes creativity and a space that I want to be in. If I was in, just super bland white room with no personal effects or any sort of personal touches. I get that some people do better with the minimalism, but I'm definitely a maximalist.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I'm right there. I mean, this is just a rented room. This isn't how I would imagine to have it. But I've done little things here and there, and I've always had a fascination with psychology and how these things work and stuff. And I got to say, sometimes even something very simple can change the whole dynamic. For instance, right now on my bed, it's just white, horrible covers, right? Which is just what I bought when I moved in. I just needed something. And then the next set of covers that I bought were nice. They had patterns on, more what I like, right? But every time I put this white cover on, I just sit there and look at it for a couple of seconds and go, this is disgusting. There's not, I know that sounds crazy to some people, but what I mean by that is it's too bland. It's devoid of anything, and it's ugly. It throws me off. It affects my mood weirdly. So then I just bought this throw not long after I got that, and I just threw it on there, and suddenly I just felt, I don't know, way better. And this was actually something I learned from my ex-girlfriend. She was European, right? And before I started dating her, I guess I was just, it wasn't even being a minimalist. I was just lazy. I was just a lazy guy. Oh, that's fine. I'll just stick that there. That's fine. I never really paid much attention to how these things can affect your mind and your mood more specifically. And ever since, it had a good impact on me, because now I'm very conscientious of just putting little things here and there. You don't even need a lot necessarily. Sometimes you can just put I'll put a record there. That looks nice. That fits in there. Little thing here, and then suddenly it kind of builds over time. And then obviously, the more stuff you accumulate, the more you just, as you said, sometimes you become a maximalist. I think I'm kind of the same. I think my ideal place that I would live would be that little cottage vibe where it's a warm fire and there's just stuff everywhere. I like that. That's what I like. But I get it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, my goal is to live in a curio shop for sure. I live in literally a 2-room apartment.
Cool.
And so this is mostly of my creation, but the other room is the creation of everyone in my life. So everybody kind of just gives me things here and there, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. I'll just put it on my wall. Yeah. And so now all of my walls are completely covered, which is kind of a shame. I don't know if you can tell, but I have that 70s wood paneling, and I absolutely love it. But now I can't hardly see any of it anymore because it's just covered in stuff.
Oh, we have it here in the UK. Like I do this volunteering stuff every week, right? And one of the jobs I have to do is like going around the city and collecting donations and giving donations, right? And naturally, you get a lot of 60s stuff, just or 70s stuff, I should say, just lots of it, and most of it is rubbish, but some of it's good. Sometimes you get like some really nice things, and I look at it and I'm like, this stuff really stands the test of time, and it has that kind of I don't know how to put it, like a warm kind of vibe about it, or like a it's got like character to it, right? Which I feel like a lot of the time it's missing when you go into like your average kind of store and you see like a live, laugh, life sign, and just, do you know what I mean? Like when you go,
absolutely.
yeah, like I couldn't ever imagine going to just like I don't know, a Home Depot type place, or like just a home store to then just buy all my stuff there. Like to me, that's fine. If you want to get like a couch, you need a couch, great. But like for like odds and ends and stuff, essentially stuff that you're just going to put in your house, it's like, why the hell would you buy it from these stores where it's like mass manufactured, it's crap, do you know what I mean? It's like you want things that mean something, and I feel like some of that, is the stuff that you get given from people. It's more special, and other things, it's like, oh, this was handcrafted by someone, or this has sentimental value, or maybe it is even just something you pick out that looks really nice, that is reflective of you in some shape or form. But I don't see how, I don't know, a live, laugh, life sign is reflective of you, or do you know what I mean?
I mean, if you have to be constantly reminded to do those three things, I don't know if you want that to reflect you, to be honest.
When I see that or something similar to that in someone's house, for me, that's like a red flag. Like that, maybe they're serial killers or something. Like, maybe there's something wrong there.
They're going to stalk you on Facebook for sure.
Keeping someone in the basement. There's something off there. Right away. Normally it's just like not the sort of people you want to be hanging around with. Generally, they're just they're either really boring, or they're like sort of like pretentious. Like, do you know what I mean? They go like, okay, I'll give you an example of what I mean. So like, like when you were at school and you'd get people who would follow the trends, but they were like massive hypocrites with it. So like when I was growing up, I was, like rock, metalhead, that kind of thing, right? So like I got all the whole, oh, that music sucks, it's rubbish, why would you like that? Why do you dress like that? Oh, your hair's terrible, blah, 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 right? And the ultimate irony and the hypocrisy that then followed was that obviously at one point I had like the emo hair thing going on with a long ass fringe and a cut short the sides of the...
Oh yeah, like the reverse mullet.
Oh, it's crazy. I don't know why that was a thing. I guess it's still kind of...
I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I don't
it's
know.
Nostalgic at this point.
Yeah, but like I can't imagine having that as an adult. Like I feel like that's very much like a teen thing. You have your moment, you grow up. I know there's adults that have it. I'm not dissing you. I just think, I don't know. Maybe it's a male thing. I mean, women seem to like always be able to pull these looks up. But I feel like when you're a bloke, like you go through like stages. Do you know what I mean? Of different looks that you go for, and bringing it back to the story. So like there was this one particular guy that would always give me crap for that, and then literally about a year and a half later, obviously the whole indie movement in the UK became like a really big thing. Bands like Zootons, Arctic Monkeys, that. So like everyone was like, especially what we call chavs, was like experimenting with, oh, maybe I'll grow my hair out a little bit. But they would be the same people that would only ever have skinheads and be like, oh, you can't have long hair because that makes you like too feminine, or like, there's something wrong with you. No. I mean, these were different times, by the way, guys. This is like mid 2000s, so shit was wild. But like, yeah, people would say that to me, and I'd be like, a year and a half ago, you were saying this to me. Now you have the haircut that I had like a year ago. Like, what? But they, like, it was almost like they were clueless to that. Like, oh, what? I said that. I was like that. What? That didn't happen. And that is how I feel most people that follow trends are like.
That tracks. They just do it because they feel like they should, or like it reflects some sort of like cultural hegemony that like, reinforces their image of themselves and where they're at. I will say I read this really interesting book, and I don't have it on me at the moment, but it's What Your Stuff Says About You, where these researchers down in Texas, in Austin, the main thing that they found was that look at the location of things. And so, like, let's say you're in an office, for example, and someone has like a picture of their family on their desk. Look at the direction it's pointing. Is it pointing at you or is it pointing at them?
Interesting.
And so if it's pointing at them, then it's there for them.
Right.
And they
Okay.
want to see that. But if it's
Right. Of course.
you,
Of
then
course.
they're projecting that they're a family person, and that's a part of the image that they want you to see. And so it
Interesting.
translates to like apartments and houses. So like very common rooms, like a living room or a den or the dining room. Those sorts of decorations are typically for other people, but things in like your bedroom, for example, are for you. And so you kind of get a sense of like people's self-perception versus how they want to be seen socially, depending on what decorations are in what room of their house.
So like, I'm not going to say who, but there are people even close to me, that have what I would term showroom houses.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is we go into the house. First of all, I mean, this is a British thing as well. Every house in Britain, or most houses in Britain that are new build, horrible white on the wall. I don't know what it is. Like, people in the UK, buy some colors, all right? We've got B&Q, home base. Just go buy a tin of yellow paint or something, and that'll immediately bring color into your life. Just saying. Anyway, you come into these houses, and I swear to God, it's a showroom. It's all based on that minimalist thing, but it's just like, no, minimalism is like having a bonsai tree on the middle of the table, and like you do things specifically in accordance with like feng shui or something, or like there's a like you, it's not that you don't have anything or that you buy useless stuff that doesn't mean anything. You're creative with how you do things.
Mm-hmm.
It's a style. Like, I've seen people that actually do it properly, and then like they're not the same people as these people that have these showroom houses, if you know what I mean.
Right. They look like lobbies for offices. Like, am I
Yeah.
waiting for the doctor, or am I in your living room?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, like when someone invites you over to their home, like you want to feel welcome. Like, okay, one of the things, I don't know if you do this as well, but like when the way I was raised, if you got someone coming over, you clean the house beforehand, you make it all tidy, you know, you try and make it as warm and friendly as possible. I don't know, you get tea, biscuits, whatever, like, you know, and you sort of lay that all out and you make them feel really special and warm and like, yeah, you know, you are my
Mm-hmm.
guest in this house, and feel comfortable, feel warm. Now, to flip that over, in the showroom type houses, it's like everything is white sofas, white house, white picture frames, everything, right? And I just sit there like this, like just feeling really awkward, like not know. And then I look around, and just going back to what you were talking about with the whole picture frames and everything, right? Yeah, everything is out facing, so I think it is for them too. But it's like even the family photos are like, they'll never be like, you know, like sometimes like when you take photos, like they're spontaneous. They're not always like
Right.
planned, you know, like, oh, we went to a professional photography place and we got these photos made. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
typically these people with these showroom houses, all of those photos will be professional photos, all of them.
Oh, absolutely.
And that freaks me out.
Yes.
It's like, where's the photo of like, okay, like, I'll give you a really good example of what I mean. My mom has this really embarrassing photo of me when I was like, I don't know, I guess like 1.5, 2 years old. And it's like me in the bathtub, like stark naked with my hair, like
Mm-hmm.
flipped like this. And but I'm smiling and it's cute, right? And that's a photo she has amongst others. And there's like a lot of photos like that. And you can tell that when we were growing up and it was just me and her, there was fun times had. There was warmth. You get warmth from that, right?
Right.
Whereas I don't feel you get the same amount of warmth from like professionally made photo. Like maybe you can, but like a lot
I
of the
mean,
time,
yeah, no, but I totally get your vibe. Like, it's kind of like the live, laugh, love sign. Like, it's very manufactured. Like, you're putting aesthetic over comfort, I think. And I think those two things can go well together. Like, I'm perfectly cozy and I'm in an interesting space. So, like, don't sacrifice for the like highbrow, like white, grayscale, everything aesthetic, because it just feels like a doctor's office.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's nothing worse than a doctor's office. Let's be real.
Seriously. We have a different kind of problem. You may have this problem too, if like, I guess if you're in like the particularly like posh areas, I would say, where like there is color and there is interesting things going on, but it feels like you're in a museum. And so you get like the opposite problem where you're like walk into a very interesting, colorful room and look at this couch and look at the rounded wall. And then the person's like, oh yeah, this like costs 5 times as much as your annual salary. And you're like, oh, am I allowed to touch anything in here? Oh shoot, I'm in like Better Homes magazine right now. And so they like get the color part and it looks cool and interesting, but then you like equally uncomfortable with the space when you realize the price tag attached to it.
I don't think you like, creativity and like colorfulness within a home or whatever. I don't think it has to have a high price tag, but yeah, obviously you want to go for places that have more history. And like even the place that I live in now, like it's just a house share. I'm not balling or anything. I'm in the situation I'm in, so I don't need to bore my listeners with that. But I lucked out. The place that I've got, I mean, it's a converted house, refurbished. I think it's like made in I'd put it somewhere between 1930s to 1960s, somewhere around there is where it's made. But it's nicer because it's the older house, and more specifically, it's got big windows, long windows, right? Which is something, it's good. You want that natural light. Right now, there's no light. It's just natural light right now. It's good. But when it comes to like your atypical houses that are built now in the UK, and I'm just talking about your average ones. So not ones that are built for purpose, ones that are built from nice materials. I'm talking standard for like your average family or for a lower income family, right? They use the cheapest materials possible. And like I said, when they paint them, insides will all be horrible white, like the whitest white you can find, right? Not even like a little bit of a beige or something. No, just white. And the actual look of the house outside, I mean, most of the time, like it's okay when they try to recreate the old styles, like 60s, 50s, whatever. That's kind of nice. Sometimes they do a good job with that, but a lot of the time they don't do that. They just make some horrible abomination, and people live there, and they don't see like how that's ugly in some way. And okay, maybe we can say these things are subjective. But I don't know. I think the place that you live should ideally be beautiful on the inside and the outside. The inside matters the most, but yeah, you don't want to like rock up from a hard day's work and look at where you live and it's just like, it looks like hell. Do you know?
Yeah, you move from one office to the other.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And again, like the inside can still be a sanctuary. So there is that, and that can help you to get over the horribleness of the outside. But still, I feel like the whole thing should be within that context of, home being your sanctuary. Home is, you create a harmony for yourself, a safe bubble and all that. And yeah, I mean, it's nicer if like, okay, so I'm living in this part of England now called Manchester, right? And Manchester famously has an area called Northern Quarter, which is very similar to London's Soho area, or like, I don't know, maybe San Francisco or whatever. It's like, art central, culture central, which for me is great. I didn't realize, I knew nothing about Manchester when I moved here apart from the music. So when I found out, there's a place called Northern Quarter and it's where all the arty people live, that's where I'm going to be. And unfortunately, I don't quite live there right now, but I go through there quite a lot. On the way to volunteering, I walk through there. It's great. I'm like, this would be great. And one day I'll probably have a little spot here or something. This is perfect, right? But the one thing that makes it so beautiful is that other than the older buildings and stuff, you'll see things like massive murals that people paint on the sides of like buildings and stuff. And like, all these arty places, like everything's full of color. And it's creative, and it's like back in the day, Camden Town in London was like that. Like there's still remnants of that. If you look at like the old parts of shop frontiers and stuff, you'll see like big creative things that people have created, like a giant shoe or something like that. But now Camden's gone too mainstream, so that's kind of died. But you still get this like arty kind of creative vibe in places, certain places in London and in Manchester and various places around the world. And I think that is an awesome thing, and like some the type of place that you'd want to live. And to some extent, you can forgo if like the quality of the place isn't all there, so long as that it's more about, you know, creating that colorfulness, having that kind of vibe, if you know what I mean.
No, absolutely. I'm actually about to leave Texas at the end of the month.
No, why?
I got a professor position
Oh,
in
congratulations.
thank you, in New Mexico. It's right outside of Santa Fe.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm about to big culture shift, but we drove out there last week, my partner and I did, to look for housing, and like all of the houses are terracotta or they're adobe, and it's just big, like the whole state is artsy, and it's so wonderful, and I'm so excited to move there because like the misconception about Texas is that people seem like to think that it's like Wild West still, and there are parts that are still very Wild West, but there are huge swaths of suburbia here.
Yeah, I
And
gotta
that's
say, just because I was going to ask you about Texas anyway. I have a very different perception of Texas now. Like, I've had quite a few people on my show from Texas, usually musicians, people working in arts and stuff, actors, and like my perception of it now is that it's basically becoming like an art hub, cultural hub, and also what do you call it? Like the second coming of like Silicon Valley or whatever. That's the kind of vibe that I get. It's basically business and tech, startups, culture, and everything else in between. And more specifically in places like Dallas, Austin, all of these places. And that blows my mind because, yeah, obviously the classic perception of Texas is, yeah, you know, like Lone Star State and
right.
you know, farms and ranches. And that part of Texas does exist. But as you say, there's this whole other world that's now building and growing because places change over time, inevitably. And
Oh yeah.
yeah,
And I would say that the majority of the state is still very much country.
oh, sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's because it's huge. It's absolutely huge. It took us 9 hours to get to our new city, driving.
Wow.
And most of that time was spent like no civilization whatsoever out in the West. And so
So is it just pure desert then, a lot of it then?
it's not desert, it's plains. And so, and a
Okay.
lot of it's agriculturalized. So there's a lot of like just miles and miles of a crop. We actually have a ton of windmills out here, or like the wind
Oh,
turbines.
this is farmlands essentially.
Now
That,
you do get to a point where you can no longer farm the land when you get closer to New Mexico, because that's desert.
right.
But the whole thing is just flat, and you like see the curvature of the earth, and like you'll go for miles without seeing anyone or a building. Like it's crazy.
That was because I went to America back in 2014, and I originally stayed in California, but we went between California to San Fran and also to Vegas. So we saw a
Ooh.
lot of stuff. It was like a long journey. But one thing that I was most surprised by was just how many farmlands there were and how much rural areas there were between those states. Like, I don't know what I was expecting, but I saw a lot of that, and that really surprised me. And I was like, okay, it's a lot more vast, and there's a lot more to contend with than I originally assumed. Because I knew that was the case in places like, you know, Nevada and Texas and stuff like that, but I didn't know that in other states. But yeah, it makes sense. But yeah, let's move it to New Mexico. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that where they filmed Breaking Bad, or have I imagined that?
Oh, I'm not entirely sure. I am.
Albuquerque, is that in?
Oh yeah, Albuquerque is in New Mexico. Yeah.
Then I think it's the same place. Yeah. So it's just like a lot of like yeah, it's very picturesque, but it's essentially like you are living in the desert, but it's heavily populated residential desert. So you get, I don't know.
I mean, I would say that it's a little bit more like nothing in between towns than say what I'm living in right now
Oh
with
wow,
Texas.
yeah.
So like I'm going to be living, I think it's like an hour north of Santa Fe in a town called Las Vegas, the original Las Vegas.
Woo.
And there's nothing between Santa Fe and Las Vegas. Like you just drive out into the high desert and it just nothing. Oh, there's the city for like an hour. So in here, I'm like an hour away from Dallas, and I go through town to get to there. So it's less people and less development and less actual farmland out there.
When I lived, because I've always found this really fascinating. Like when I lived in Europe, I lived in a country called Estonia,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a similar thing that I noticed as well. Like Estonia is tiny; it's a very small country, but it's essentially you got several different like major cities. They're still small, but like they're the cities, right? And then everything in between is farmlands. But yeah, there's a lot of like just land or
Mm-hmm.
farms or nothing, right? But the weirdest thing that I always saw was like every now and again you'd get to some like sort of randomly there would be like just not like exactly like tower blocks, but they're kind of like old Soviet buildings, but they were on what is essentially just farmlands. Do you know what I mean? So you'd see like a tiny pocket of civilization and then no more civilization for
Mm-hmm.
miles. And that always kind of blew my mind. It's in the same way that when you travel around like in the States and yeah, you just see like a massive city, but in the midst of the desert. And it's like, what? It's like there's no life for ages and then there's suddenly life and then back to no life again. It's just, I don't know.
Yep.
It's really weird.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something that I see particularly on like YouTube with people
Right.
from Europe who come to visit the States, and they're like, "Oh, we had to get a car.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
we wanted to visit two different cities, but they were like 6 hours away from each other and there was nothing in between."
yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, no, that's about right."
I think realistically, if you wanted to travel the States, you'd need to, depending on how you do the trip, if you want to do a quick one, I think at least anywhere between 6 months to a year. But we're talking like you barely see anything. Like, you just stop off. Maybe you spend a day, then you move in.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, you have to take it state by state for most of it.
but I wouldn't want to do. I'd want to go the long haul. I'd want to do like really like if I go to New York, I want to be there for like a while. I don't want to be there like 2 days. I don't feel like you can do much in 2 days. But then it depends where you are. Do you know what I mean? But I feel like most places, especially in America, you would need a lot of time to be there. Probably like a month or something to really like
Mm-hmm.
see everything and
Mm-hmm.
really get the vibe and the feel of the place. Like I felt like I really got a lot out of the time we were in the States because we were only there for 2 weeks, but we managed to see a lot of California. Not all
Mm-hmm.
of it though, to be honest,
Oh
but like a
yeah.
fair bit. And then we really, I feel like Las Vegas, you know, if you see a little bit of it, you've seen most of what it is because it's basically just it's casinos. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's the devil's
Yeah.
playground. It's whatever. And I quickly realized that, but that is nothing against Las Vegas, by the way. It's just that like some places are a bit more straightforward. And I think others are not so much. Like somewhere like New
Mm-hmm.
York there's so many things, so much history, so many different things to see. I don't think you can really do that in such a short space of time. But as you say,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, absolutely. You cannot do a holiday in America or vacationing or any kind of traveling there without a car. Like you just can't. It's impossible.
Nope. Mm-hmm.
It's just not.
We can't even live here without cars.
Oh, that's mad. That's kind of crazy. Like what do you do if like you can't afford it? Like if you're just in a tight spot or something, like what do you do?
You pray that you have a friend or relative or coworker to drive you around, and if not, then you're gonna get absolutely screwed by Uber.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
So I had a friend who didn't have a car, and he had to get to work every day, so he just Ubered, and like that was a huge chunk of his paycheck. And I'm just like, well, it's super expensive to have a car, but in the long run, having a car is cheaper than relying on Uber
Do you know?
to get to and fro.
Okay, so like how far was he traveling roughly?
Uh, it was across town. It was in Fort Worth. I want to say it was probably like 20 minutes there and back
Okay, so 20 minutes. Do you know roughly how much per trip it was costing him?
per trip. With Uber here, it's usually like $10 a trip.
For real? Wow, for
Yeah,
20-minute journey, that's
it's quite expensive. We rented a car to go to New Mexico because my partner and I both have older cars, and we were like, we're not breaking down in the middle of nowhere. And it cost me like $20 just to get from like right outside of downtown Dallas to downtown Dallas. And I was like, 20, like I was in the car for 10 minutes and you charged me $20.
Jesus. Yeah.
So
Actually, I suppose it's even worse if you're a tourist as well. Jesus Christ.
oh yeah, no, you will lose money. I mean, depending on where you are, it's worth it, but just prepared to hand out the cash.
Oh man, that's
And it's always more than you think it is because we don't put taxes into our total prices.
Oh,
And we
yeah.
don't put tips into our total prices either, which is mad confusing for people.
The tips thing I can understand because it's just like, okay, 10%, 20%, whatever, like, you know, you just figure that out. That's pretty straightforward. But the taxes thing, like, that just used to drive me nuts. Like, why? Why don't you include taxes? Like, when I go to the store and I buy, I don't know, some Mountain Dew and like a chocolate or something, right? It's $1.50. Go to the till. Oh, that'll be $2.45. What? Oh, you gotta pay the taxes. What? What would you mean? I don't know. I mean, wait, in the UK we've got value added tax, or it's included into it. But you never see the price listed as before. And sometimes randomly, sometimes you might see on the receipt it will actually give you the breakdown and say how much the VAT is, but you never pay attention because it's included in the price. So the price is just plus the tax. So you just only pay attention to that number. But,
oh yeah, no. And it drives us crazy. It drives us crazy because I'll go into a restaurant and buy like an $8 meal.
right.
Well, that's already $1 tax. So now my $8 meal is $9 plus the 25% or 15% that I give the waiter. So now I walked in and ordered something for $8 and I'm walking out spending like $12.
Yeah, this is what I thought as well, because if you're tight on money or you need to, you know, pay a specific amount, you've always got to then include more to that. So like if you say, okay, I only want to spend $30, then you need to get, let's say it's a restaurant, you need to, I suppose, get somewhere around like the 21, 22 mark as like the maximum that you can spend. And then everything above that is taxes. And it's like, that's just, yeah, that sounds like a massive headache perpetually. I couldn't live like that. I just, no.
I don't know how we do.
Just amazing. Do you not like, has there not been, I don't know, votes to try to change that over time, like to maybe replicate the system we have in the UK or something different, or does that never come up?
I don't think it's ever come up. I mean, I'm sure, I mean, everybody constantly, you know, gripes about it, but I don't think that there's ever been any official push to change that. I think it's just kind of, we've accepted our purgatory.
Fair enough. I mean, I suppose maybe it would be more hassle to try and change the system. Maybe that would be too much of a headache. Maybe
I mean, changing price tags.
Yeah, I suppose most of it is more automatic these days, isn't it? I suppose it would just be like,
yeah, you could do it. Although, you know, we all have, you know, smartphones. Well, not all of us have smartphones, but you have easy access to a calculator most of the time. So it's not like you're going in blind.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's bring it back to you. So you host a podcast known as Psychosocial Distancing. I love this.
Yes.
Took us through the purpose of the podcast and the topics you discuss on the show. And quick question before you answer that. Is it based on the Slipknot song? Is that like a play on that, or is it just fun?
So we based it off of, we didn't base it off of Slipknot, unfortunately. We based it off of, you know, the social distancing that we're going through with COVID, because this is what started it. So we started it, I believe the first episode was like July 15th. And I had been very interested in starting a podcast for a while. So like you said at the beginning, will have my educational psychology degree. So a lot of educational psychology is related to the teaching material, the teaching method, and like the context in which the teaching occurs. And so I was very interested in podcasts as kind of like a learning device and as a way to kind of supplement or provide access to knowledge to people in a way that it can, you know, be a periphery experience. So, you know, I'm sure you're aware, like when people listen to podcasts, they're driving, they're doing their dishes. It's usually the secondary thing that's going on in the background. And then they usually go, oh, hey, I learned this today.
Yeah.
And it takes something away from it. So I've been very interested in like the efficacy of podcasts as a teaching device. And back last year in spring 2020, like right before we had shutdowns and everything moved online, I was actually in a educational technology course, and I was doing my final project on podcasting and looking through the research to see how instructors use it and how it supplements lecture, and how you can embed it within an online learning space. And then we shut down and everything went online. And so the podcast grew out of this desire to provide some sort of like human connection to students. And so, when you're in an online class, like you're alone, your professor is typically going to only respond to you like an automated email service, like, hey, you submitted this, good job. And
Okay.
you have no idea who else is in the class typically. So unless you have a really good teacher who works really hard on building that like online atmosphere and
Yeah.
like social connection, you're reading a book and taking a multiple choice quiz, and then you submit something at the end of the semester and your professor says, thanks.
That sounds like most education in general. Really. It doesn't sound that doesn't sound that different to normal class. Like, I don't know what maybe it's different at university level, but I remember at school, it would be like that. Just be like, open the textbook, do the assignment.
Yeah, no, it's very much like that a lot of the time, at least in a university class, unless you've got someone who's just reading off of PowerPoint slides, which is its own special hell. You get
Dude, I've had that so many times. I don't know if I've ever told this story actually, but I remember there was a university lecture that I did. It was a particular module because I studied management and marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in the
dark arts,
it was fun. I enjoyed it. Marketing's good because marketing. I'm fascinated with psychology, and marketing has a lot of psychology involved.
Oh, absolutely.
And business in general. Yeah. So like the stuff on like consumer behaviorism and stuff like that, I was like, this is amazing. But in the beginning, obviously first year's foundation. So you just do what everyone else in the whole of the management does. Mm-hmm. So you don't get to choose what you do. You only get like a tiny bit of marketing. Then the second year, it's the same for the first part of the second year. And then the second part of the second year, it finally starts going into your specialism, right? So basically a year and a half of doing stuff that you don't want to do.
Right.
So that annoyed me. But there was a particular module, it was information systems or some crap like that. And I was so frustrated because there were so many problems with uni. Things like buying textbooks that they never use. You're already paying, well, here in the UK, you pay like $9,000 per term, right? So when you start and they tell you, you need to pay £300 per term for these textbooks in which we'll only use maybe 2 to 3 pages. And if you don't have it, we're going to fail you and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what about if I don't have the money? And it's like, oh, well, maybe you'll have to borrow them from someone else. And it's basically a way of saying like, screw you if you're poor. Like,
yep,
that's your problem.
Absolutely.
But like, yeah,
that's exactly what it is.
Mate, it makes me angry. But like, I quickly discovered you don't actually need the textbooks. There's ways you can work around that. Mm-hmm. But there was one particular one, as I said, this module, information systems, and every single time we would go to the lectures, in the very beginning, we quickly realized it was pointless. And the reason that we realized this is we actually bought the textbook for the module because you needed it for that particular module. You needed it. But here's the thing. When we would turn up, the actual professor who wrote the book, who did everything, with regards to that.
He assigned his own book.
Is a lady. And they all do it. They all do it because it's a business. So like on their course, it won't be the primary book, but most of the books on the course will be their own books. And
so pretentious.
From a business standpoint, it makes sense. The business side of me, it's like, do you know what? That's good business.
It makes sense, but it's still like, here's my book I wrote because I'm such a scholar.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. They do it. It's a factory. So you go into like 7th, 8th edition every year, new edition, and the only things that change are, if they have a major, if they have a major new theory, they'll just make a new book. But like, normally they just release the same thing every single year, maybe a new foreword, and then the case studies will change, and that'll be it.
Yep.
Whatever.
Pro tip for university students right now who listen is type in the title of your textbook and put PDF, and then just download a free copy of an older edition because it doesn't change. And to be honest, textbooks themselves are even outdated too. Yeah. Like they don't do a very good job of keeping up with current literature anyway, even if you get one from the year that, like, if you're taking the class and you get one that was published that year, it's still going to be behind like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, which is bizarre. I don't understand why you can't get it at least within a year of the release. Do you know, why does it have to be
Mhm.
so old? You know what I mean? It's like, and it's painful, particularly for business as well, because obviously business is heavily related to, you know, culture and what happens in society and stuff like that. So like you'll get like I remember they were giving us examples of things like that happened at like the Super Bowl or something. But it'd been like 5 years prior to that or something. So it was like so out of date. And we're like, yeah, this happened years ago,
Mhm.
man. Like this is, and I hate to be mean, but look, the world moves differently
Mhm.
right now. It moves so quickly, and you either need to keep up and move with the times, or devote yourself to sort of a way of life that doesn't rely on that, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
Which is possible. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of professions, things you can do in life that you don't have to worry about, like keeping up with the latest bloody technology every 5 seconds.
Mhm.
But if you do want to keep into it, if you are in the entertainment industries or business or whatever, you need to keep up with everything. You know what I mean? Like me, look, I'm 27 years old. I'd say I'm pretty switched on and I have the pulse on what's going on in society. And even I often will find things from the generation underneath me where I'm like, what the hell? What does that mean? What's the context of this? I don't understand. No, normally it'll be things like memes or like something like that. But like, like the memes have evolved to such a degree now that like they've become so context heavy. So like
Yes.
sometimes it's actually impossible to find the context. Or if you do
Mhm.
find the context, it's like one of those, oh, you had to be there kind of things. Like I don't know.
Yes.
My first instance of realizing that was where there was one that I had to Google and find out about, and the meme was based on like a video game character or something. And when I finally found that out, I still didn't really understand the significance of that. And I understood then you needed to have been part of that generation and played that game and understood it. You know, it's the
Oh,
same as
yeah.
like when we talk about like, oh man, you kids wouldn't have been able to deal with like modern warfare lobby circa 2006 2007, but that is the same thing because you had to have played it to understand how brutal and crazy. Like, obviously you find evidence of it online and you know
Oh, yeah.
they've done clips of it and stuff, but like that's pretty mild like compared to what actually happened. Like, you know, that's
Mhm.
way worse, trust me. um but yeah, it's a similar thing. It's interesting. It is interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm also 27, and so when I talk to my younger sister who is a part of that Gen Z cohort, I'm just like, she sends me videos and memes and stuff, and I'm like, is this like avant-garde art that I'm not supposed to understand? Am I
Yeah,
supposed to understand this? What is happening here?
it's interesting. My 15-year-old brother is very switched on with things, right? And we both post memes on our accounts as well because I like to mix. So like, if you follow me on Instagram, right, I will publish stuff about myself, you know, my podcast, my latest videos, blah blah blah. But I'll also post like pretty stuff that I like, you know, like arty stuff, and
Hmm.
then memes, right?
Yeah.
But when I compare my memes to the memes that he's posting, I feel like a boomer by
Yes.
comparison. I feel like what I'm laughing at is just sad and pathetic, and like, I should just accept that I'm an old man. But it's like I'm not that old. I'm not like 50. I'm still like a young man. But compared to him, I'm ancient. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because I used to look at
Especially in
people.
internet years, like,
Yeah, it's like light years away, man.
oh, absolutely. Um,
Oh my god.
yeah, no, it's a lot. And that's kind of like, to wrap it back to the point of the podcast, particularly the point about like professors, like, you know, setting up books that are outdated or they've already
Oh,
written for themselves.
can I just add to that, by the way? I
Oh,
didn't even
yeah.
finish that story. So, like, that professor that did that with that lecture, she literally, every time we turn up to our lessons, she would read
Ah.
verbatim, word for word. And she was a professor. It's not even like she was like some, I don't know, PhD student that didn't care or something. Because obviously you get that. I understand when you're studying for a PhD, um, you know, there's people that want to teach and want to go down that route, and you can tell because they're passionate and they love teaching. And then there's everyone else who doesn't like doing it, but is forced into doing it. And I do understand that that's annoying, but please don't make everyone else suffer. You were a student once, or you were a bachelor student once. Don't make everyone else suffer. Do you know what I mean? And like with this teacher, I think that was the first major realization that university is a business, and they don't care. They will legit read from a fucking PowerPoint that is based word for word on the textbook that they've given you. Like literally after that, we just didn't go to the lectures anymore. Always go to the seminars, but lectures, you can miss those. It doesn't affect
you. No, that's ridiculous. And the worst part is like when they fill time with student presentations. I don't know if y'all deal with that at all, but like it's like, yeah, I'm gonna read out of the book for the first like several weeks, and then we're just gonna have like a revolving door of your student presentations for the last couple weeks because I don't have any more material to cover. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. And then, the whole process of evaluation on the teacher's part is like a customer service satisfaction survey.
Yeah.
So like
I forgot about that. Yeah.
It's so, like you don't even have to teach students anything. You just have to make them feel good at the end. And typically to make them feel good at the end, you just give them their A or their B or whatever grading system they're using.
You totally unlocked a memory for me. I totally forgot that. And that's amazing that happens in the States too. Yeah. So I'll explain for our listeners, for anyone who hasn't gone to uni. So at the end of every, usually every term, isn't it? I think. Yeah. Every term.
At the end of every course, essentially.
Yeah, every course or every term, you get like these questionnaires that you have to fill out, both in the seminars and the lectures. And it's your typical like, how did I do? How did you find the course? How was it? And it's like the most childish thing I've ever seen in my life. And it really, I mean, it's anonymous, so it's fine. So you can be honest and you can say if it's terrible and you can give your thoughts. So that element of it is good. I'll give credit where credit's due. But look, first of all, they make it, I don't know about you, but they made it compulsory for us to have to fill it out. Yeah. And it wasn't like a quick, like 5-minute deal. It was pretty lengthy. There was some open-ended questions. A lot of us would just be, be like, you were fine. Carry on, like, do you know what I mean? Like, we don't care. Like, we're too busy with our degrees to care about filling out this stupid form. Like, do you know what I mean?
Right.
And like, if you're gonna do multiple choice, make it quick.
Yes.
Have like, if you're gonna do multiple choice, have a thing that's like, I don't know, if it's 15 questions, 13 of them are multiple choice, and the final 2 are open-ended, but you make them optional. That's how you do a proper form. And then, to be honest, you'll probably get more likely less people spoiling the results, or they'll actually pay attention and do it. Even people that are lazy will probably do it because it's quick. It's like do, and they'll probably be nicer in the feedback as well.
Right. They don't get burnt out by the time they get to the open-ended questions. And that's how they really feel.
To be honest, there was a lot of stuff there that was childish. Like I remember because we stopped going to lectures pretty much from 3 weeks in onwards, once we realized that it was very hit and miss if the lectures would actually be useful to us. This is just my personal course, but it was very hit and miss. You had to really pick and choose, because sometimes you'd just be going there and it'd be literally be a waste of time. It would either be boring, monotonous, or it would be not useful in some way. The seminars, I stand by it. Seminars, at least at business management and marketing is concerned, go to every single one. That is the holy grail of education right there. But because you get to ask someone who is, because for us it was always a PhD student that would be the leader of the seminars. And
I'm guessing the seminars are analogous to our labs.
I guess so. I mean, it's literally just you sit in a room, small group, and
it's small, it's casual. You've got someone sometimes they have some sort of presentation or task for you to do, but typically y'all are just walking through the content for the week.
Well, it's like your opportunity to basically ask. It's twofold. So you can ask what you don't understand in the lectures, because they'll be tied to the course tutor. Like they're essentially working for the course tutor. So if the tutor is a professor, they're a PhD student under them, so it kind of makes sense that they have a vested interest in it. And they'll help you understand and make sense of the lectures, and then they'll also make additional content for the seminars that's like specific to the seminars, but it relates to the main course stuff. So it's all useful, but often it will help expand upon what's going on in the lectures. And I don't know, for me, I always found like it was more useful, and I understood. And more specifically, you can put your hand up and ask questions. It's not like the lecture where you got 300 people in the room and you're like asking a question in front of 300 people, and you don't want to be that guy that asks some dumb question, or you just feel awkward. Because I felt, I'm a pretty fairly comfortable guy talking in front of crowds and people, but even I didn't like put my hand up and asking a question, because you don't want to be like, oh wow, he asked that, wow, what an idiot. Like,
to be honest though, you can ask a whole assortment of dumb questions, because the people in particularly the 300 level, like 300 person courses, like top back of the room, they don't know what's going on, they're on their phone. So if you ask a dumb question, they're like, oh, that's a smart question, I didn't know the answer to that, even though the professor just said it.
I've got a photo of this because I still to this day, I don't judge people too harshly. It's not like I was always 100% focused on every lecture. Most of the time, I was just there to hopefully absorb something and just be there to justify attendance and stuff. Right? Once I realized like how to actually do uni, like in an effective manner. But that being said, I would judge other people who would act like this. There was a girl who legitimately was watching. She was watching a fucking movie.
Oh yeah.
During the lecture. I was like, why are you here? What is the point? Like, what is the point? I couldn't believe it. I just screenshotted it. I just, wow. Just wow. What is, and you're paying to be here. Like, look, I'm not trying to be like Mr. Sanctimonious, Mr. Annoying, and be like, oh, it's your own time you're wasting. But like, you are. Like, when you look at it, like how much money you're going to owe afterwards. And this is why I don't take it too seriously when they threaten you, like, oh, you need to go to lectures, you need to do this, you need to do that. No, do the degree in the way that works best for you. So if you're most effective, studying in your own place or studying in the library, or that's your way, do that. Do the bare minimum you need just to not get thrown off the course as far as seminars and lectures, but do what's most effective for you. Because look, they're not going to help you to get the degree. You're the one who's in charge of doing that. Like, they'll give you tips and tricks. Like, obviously, like I learned this more recently, but the whole thing with the reading list, that they don't tell you that, but it's supposed to be, these are things that would help you, but every single thing that you read will take you in different directions. They make it seem like you have to read everything on that list, which is, it's not possible. And B, if you do that, you'll drive yourself nuts. There's
Absolutely.
just not enough time. But you're not supposed to do that. That's not actually what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to read some of it and pick a direction. And that's often where the assignments will go. If you have to do an essay, it's like you pick one of the different readings and that'll take you in a different direction. And you base your theories on that.
Right.
I'll tell you that.
And I will say, though, I don't really judge students terribly much for doing the whole watching the movie and lecture. I mean, obviously, I won't allow it in my classrooms. But, like you said, the university is a business. And so the student pays for parking, they pay tuition, they pay for their food. So like they're paying for their degree. So there's a very much this consumer mindset when it comes to university right now. And so you are paying for that grade is kind of the connection that's made there for the students, because they're paying for everything else. And so if you look at like that, customer service satisfaction survey, if you're a teacher who's rough and actually challenges your students and actually, makes them do the reading and actually makes them pay attention, learning is uncomfortable, and that's going to reflect poorly on those customer service satisfaction surveys. And so on the back end of those surveys, because I just had to do this, I had to average all of my courses that I taught as a student to get the job that I'm moving into, and then include that in my packet, and along with like quotes from students from those open-ended. So the university that hired me had to go through and look at my customer service satisfaction averages.
I've got to ask.
So
ask.
Oh yeah. Well, let me say one thing real quick.
Please
so
do.
The incentive for professors is to make students as comfortable as possible so they can move up and get tenure, they can move out and get a new job. And so the incentive structure encourages students to just show up, purchase their grade, watch the movie in the back of the classroom, because they don't actually have to learn anything most of the time.
Yeah, and that seems to be what like even the school system seems to be running the same way, at least in the UK. It seems like school, college, university, it's all based on that premise of like for example, this is something I learned really recently as well. If you're at school and they're telling you like, oh, it's really important that you get these high grades, it's not because they want you to do well. It's because the more higher grades they get,
The more money they get.
the more money they get, and then the higher the
Mm-hmm.
ratings of the schools will be. So obviously in the UK, that's Ofsted for high schools and primary schools. It's the governing body that basically checks each school.
Mm.
So and like like when I realized that, I was like, Jesus, that's exactly how unis are as well. Like, they just care about the average. And like I understand that those people are there and that they don't care particularly, and you know it doesn't bother me that much. I mean, you know, they're wasting their own time and stuff, but like I think for professors and teachers that really care about what they're doing, it is frustrating to see that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's like I just wonder why they bother turning up. You know what I mean?
Right, because it's a weird position to be in. So I just finished up reading. It's a book called Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher, and he talks about kind of the shift between like the disciplinary society to the control society. So like in the disciplinary society, like you left your house to go to a building where you are surveyed and you know you do your work or your school. So like you go to the workplace, you go to the university, you sit in the classroom. And then the control society is that control system follows you around with your phone. And so you're surveyed through your phone now. And so you are incentivized through the phone to do what you're supposed to do or through media, etc. And the university still has the structure of the discipline society where you have to go in, you sit single file, you have to take your tests like you would in like the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, but the people in the room are living in the control society, so they're given a media diet constantly of entertainment. And so how do you manage the control subject within the discipline structure? And so the teacher ends up both being like a disciplinarian who is goal is to get you to pass the test, but also the facilitator entertainer, because you have to constantly engage the students as well. So you have to both be good cop and bad cop in the classroom.
I don't think it's that difficult, you know, because I've often stated this as an example, but I had a professor for a module that, to be honest, I didn't even particularly like, but he made it so enjoyable and so fun that he had the biggest turnouts for his lectures.
Right. Yeah.
Not one day. Trust me, when he was doing his seminars, no one was missing those seminars. When he was doing lectures, if you think, okay, we had 300 people in our year, right? Average attendance for a lecture was between 10 to 20 people. I kid you not, right? And I was one of those suckers that was there because I'm a sucker and I turn up to stuff, even though I perpetuate about, oh, you can skip. And I believe me, I did skip lectures. Most of the time I was there, you know what I mean? Because I just figured like, if I can, I should go, you know what I mean? But with his lessons, I was always there, and there was a higher turnout. I think he got between 50 to 75 people generally, and then full attendance when they were pushing attendance on us. Because the uni really did try to intervene in second and third year, and it was like, really, this is when we really need to be doing independent study, and we need as much time as possible. And they were trying to force us to go to lectures, and it was just a waste of time. But anyway, his lectures were excellent, and I put that down to his passion. But also, you know, they say that like you only have like 20 minutes of someone's attention before they click off and stuff, right?
Yeah.
The way to like battle that, I think, is to kind of like peer into the interactivity, bring the students in. Because if you're just talking for a full 50 minutes, I mean, sometimes you can hold a room with that. Sometimes, you know, it's possible. But it's tough, especially with a lecture as well. When you're just relaying information, you're always going to have the front row of kids that are, you know, taking all the notes, doing everything. Are they really engaged? Like, how engaged are you if you're just taking notes? Not really. You know, you're kind of maybe you can do both, but most of the time you're either paying attention or you're writing notes and not half paying attention. And then everyone else, as we explained before, is either half listening, maybe they're sleeping, maybe they're playing games. I don't know. Maybe, oh, they're not there. So it's like,
Yeah, they're not there.
it's like, you know, that's what you got to contend with. So I think to draw them in, you need to have that kind of, you talk for 5-10 minutes, take some questions.
Mm-hmm.
You bring the interactivity into play, and you make it interesting for them, and you give fun examples. You give stuff that will make people think, shock people every now and again with something that you wouldn't expect them to say. Because I think that's the thing as well. There's a massive disconnect between you, the student, and then the professor who's up here. And like there's that hierarchy system.
Right.
And I know, don't get me wrong, I know there's teachers that try to kind of be a bit more like, hey, I'm down with the kids. But it's like people like that, but like don't like that. Like I think there's a way. There's a way.
It depends on how you do it. Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah. There's a way to do these things, and I think normally it's one hard extreme. It's either boring, monotonous, can't stand you, or too over the top, trying to be my friend, get away from me. It's very hard to get the middle balance, but some people do it. I've had professors that have done it, so I know it's possible.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a big challenge to teach and compete with the phone.
Oh yeah, no, don't get me wrong. Yeah,
like that's a stiff competition. Like, am I gonna get you off your phone today?
I mean, look, I'm old fashioned anyway. I think that's the rudest thing you could ever do is be sitting there on your phone. You know, I never used to do that. I'd have it like with me, and I'd check things when I needed to, but I wouldn't be generally like another human being is talking to you and giving you their attention. Don't be rude.
Right. No, absolutely.
If you want to sit on your phone, just don't bother showing up. You know, like I think that's less rude than sitting there with your phone. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, and it used to annoy me. Like everything, I do business presentations and I look around the room, and I hate doing that anyway. Because I can easily do it in front of a room of like 300 people, no problem. You know, I've been a musician in the past, you know, I've performed in front of crowds. That's easy. But when you're in a room, an intimate room of like 10, 15 people with your peers, and you're trying to, you know, stress this thing, and you're worried about it, and you're also being assessed by the lecturer, like it's not a great situation to be in. But when you see those fuckers, like a couple of them just sitting there on their phone, like, yeah,
yep.
It's like, get your fucking head up. Like, I was paying attention to your crappy presentation. Pay attention to my good presentation. Fucking,
you'll learn something.
Oh man, and it'll always be the same. I remember this, right? You ever get that thing where with the group projects, because I could talk all day about group projects, they drive me nuts. I hate working in groups purely because you always get lazy people.
Oh yeah,
lazy fucks. And this is especially true at university. Like there was a guy I used to specifically do projects with, and we would seek each other out because we both knew we would do work, and we knew, okay, if there's 5 people, at least me and you, if we do our work, we'll get it done, we'll be okay. Because obviously, I've been in situations where it's all just come down to me, and I have to carry it. And I remembered so many times watching group presentations where you can see the person that did no work and like nothing, and they're like, they've literally been handed a script to read, and they're like, and it was this, and yeah, and then like they all get a fucking A star, and it's like, but they didn't do any work, they did nothing, they don't deserve jack shit. Why are they getting that? What?
So I found a way to get around it, so where I can use the group presentations, like group projects in my courses, but like not have that. I make it so that every single student within the group, like they're all working on the same topic, but they all have their own independent project within that topic that they have to outline to me. And so when they go up and present it, I can tell who did their work, because it may all, so like, for example, in my human sexuality class, we had a group that did like, it was really cool. We had 2 groups. One group did sex toy software, and the other one did sex toy hardware. Okay. And so each individual within there chose like a different dating app or a different kind of like, someone did teledildonics. Are you familiar?
No, I think I've heard the name, but don't really know what that is.
It's a it's a dildo and then a like a fleshlight that are connected via Wi-Fi. And so you can be apart, and the movement of one affects the movement of the other.
Okay, interesting.
So it's good for like couples in long distance relationships.
Okay.
So they would do that. So when that person came up and talked about, you know, like the Wi-Fi dildos, I was like, okay, yes, here's all of your work, blah, 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 blah. And then I could assess the collective and go, okay, you did your work, you didn't do your work. Okay, here's all of your individual grades. Because they each were distinct within the presentation. They didn't like sort themselves. They had to come to me first to approve their sorting. So I was like, okay, now I can track you. So that way I'm not screwing over the person who did most of the work to put the PowerPoint together.
I'm sorry, if I was studying human sexuality, I would just be like enthralled in that. That sounds amazing. Do you know, like, how could you be bored and not do your work?
So much fun. And I'm real sneaky. I teach some stats in that class.
Okay.
Because we pull up like research articles and stuff like that. And so I teach them statistics and like statistical literacy in the course, and they don't even know it because think they're just learning about like average like penis sizes or how frequently people have sex in a week or things like that. But like I'm under the radar building that stats literacy for them.
Okay.
And so they have no idea. They just think they're having fun. But then when they leave the class, they're like, oh, I know what a normal distribution is. I know what significance means. I know what effect sizes are.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ha ha ha, you just thought you were learning about penises.
That's clever. That is clever. Like how would you say your research on human sexuality has affected like your own sex life in terms of like how you perceive it and how you approach it? Because I always wonder, like, if you're studying the thing, especially something as personal as your sex life, like obviously being a scientist and being scientifically minded, you obviously like extract it and stuff. But I wonder, like, wouldn't that kind of like destroy a lot of it for you? Like it's kind of like almost takes everything away because you understand it on such a deep level and like, do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I think the one thing that I've learned, and this is a benefit, I think, is that people are both a lot weirder than you think they are and a lot more normal than you think they are.
Okay.
Like at the same time. It's really weird. It's kind of like a paradox. So, you know, there is no like equation or formula or prescription I can give you for a healthy sex life because it's so independent on each person. So there's a study that came out recently that looked at it was like the experimental sample, like they had to double their sexual frequency in a week, and then a control group got to do just their regular sexual frequency, and the control group came out more sexually satisfied. So it's not even how much sex you're having, it's like what is right for you. And so I'm a lot more comfortable with my decisions romantically and sexually now because I'm like, I get to be the boss of this. Like there is no formula or like norm that is overreaching enough to affect any individual person in society. Like we have a bunch of expectations and we got a bunch of misconceptions, but when it comes down to it, there is no like secret magical formula that's going to like make it better. So just as an example, I actually so obviously you know what the Sun is because you're in the UK. The tabloid.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
I was covered in the Sun last week for
How
saying
so?
that consensual non-monogamy had better relationship outcomes than monogamous couples did.
Okay.
And so we ran a study with like 550 people who were in consensually non-monogamous relationships. This is like your swingers, your open relationship, your polyamory, and they did better in love, passion, satisfaction, fulfillment. They had healthier coping mechanisms for relationship issues. The only thing that didn't differ was that the monogamy and the non-monogamy were equal on trust, which I thought was weird. And because I figured you'd have to be like way more trusting if you're going to have an open relationship. But they both had the same level of trust. And so I don't recommend people go into open relationships just because the stats say it's better, because it's like a lot of work. Like the underlying meaning of the stats is that if you want those positive outcomes, it's not like changing your relationship and ooh, it's all better. It's those people have to monitor and like emotionally and socially and sexually satisfy multiple people throughout the week. And that is exhausting. And you learn how to do it better, because you get more practice, you know, being able to meet different needs of different people in different ways. But God, I would go to bed tired every night. Like even just like an evening meal would be exhausting.
Yeah, here's the thing, like, because I'm more into monogamous relationship. Like
Mm-hmm.
I thought about polyamorous and stuff, and I think it's something that I couldn't do purely for this one fact, right? Which is that if I would discover that my partner was sleeping with other people, that would just break me. It would
Right.
destroy me. But I don't judge people for having those type of relationships. If anything, I think it's amazing. But I looked at it like, if it was possible for me to do it, how would I do it? And I think the only way that I sort of rationalize in my head that I could do it is if you have that relationship
Mm-hmm.
with that person, but then the people that you sleep with, there's no love there. There's no kind of, like, it's just sex basically.
Right.
That I kind of made sense to me, because it's like, you know, if for like hypothetically, if you couldn't get fully satisfied by the person you're with,
Mm-hmm.
and you both understand like, oh, it's nothing against you, it's just, you know, I need, I don't know, maybe that like
I need to get tied up and you don't know how to do knots.
Yeah, you know, it could be something as silly as that, or like just like you want to go a bit too crazy with something and they're not really into that, so you get what you need elsewhere, but you don't want to lose that relationship that you have with them, because that's like the draw. That makes perfect sense to me. But what you just laid out, where they're having multiple like relationship, like emotional and physical, I don't understand that. I kind of get, it's kind of like fascinating in a way, because it's like, how do you know unless you try? But at the same time, it's like, yeah, that does sound exhausting. And how is it possible that you could love several people at once? I mean, I suppose it's possible.
I mean, obviously it's possible. Like, you know, you can maintain several different kinds of relationships at the same time. But doesn't
it lessen it though? It lessens, because isn't love...
Well, I mean, they were reporting more love than the monogamy. So, well, I'm not recommending, and I'm not non-monogamous either. Like, I'm very monogamous. I would not, because of this research, switch sides by any means. But I think it has to do with that, like, it takes a lot of time, like, because you learn how to love somebody, right? Like, you don't just go in, like, if you just rely on your feelings when you enter a relationship, that's going to end in like 6 months. And then you like, and you didn't spend the time to learn how to love that person. So if you are learning how to love multiple people over the course of time, you're learning different ways of socially interacting and being with different people. And so you get better at it because you get more practice. It's kind of like having sex. Like, the more you have sex, the better you get at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's like a crash course in relationships to be in an open relationship, because you get like multiple different kinds of relationships that, and different people that you have to sexually, romantically, and socially satisfy. And so I believe it's a lot of hard work to do that. And especially for like monogamous couples who are like having a hard time and they're like, oh, we'll just open up our relationship and that'll save us.
Worst idea ever.
No.
That
will not work. Neither will having a child.
Yeah. Let's add another person into this equation, into our already terrible relationship. That's a great idea.
You've got to sort your own house first before you bring other people in. Like, if you haven't figured out that monogamy yet, you're not going to be successful with the non-monogamy, because it's a lot of work. So to answer your question about how it affects my sex life, like, I can do that research and then not feel like I need to go be non-monogamous now.
Yeah, it's a disconnect then, basically.
Yeah, it's, you know, but I will say it's made like pornography awkward, because I do a little bit of like porn research, and so I'll be in my office on my computer scrolling through porn. I'm like, okay.
So someone comes in, you're like, what are you doing? Oh, research. Oh,
research.
Yeah, I bet you are.
Flip the window and there's a giant Excel spreadsheet with all of my codes on it. And I'm like, yep, I'm tired of watching this. Oh, yep, nope, that's the same order of behaviors they did in the last video. Great. So much diversity. So exciting.
So you must be just like you just don't watch porn then, you're just bored of it now.
I mean, I still watch it, but like, it's definitely not what it was.
The magic is gone.
The magic is gone. The movie magic has been broken.
Yeah. No,
I'm like, oh.
I'll give you that.
Tiring.
I don't often talk about these things, but I will say that I think most porn is just shockingly terrible.
Yes.
It's just not. I mean, it's gotten better, I think, over the past 10, 15 years. But it's sometimes, especially because I'm into acting and stuff. So I'll hear them playing out their scene, doing role play. I'm just like, oh my god, I can't watch it. Like the act is so bad. You don't have to do a lot to make this good, but you somehow managed to make this terrible. It's just get some acting lessons before you do this, people.
No, serious. Well, I mean, and they don't even need to have all of the scenes and the characters. Like the background and like how the characters are dressed before they're undressed will give you enough inference that you don't need to pretend to be actors.
Yeah. Less is more, I think.
Less is more. Less is more important.
I think so. Yeah, because like, as you say, like a lot of it is scenario based or role play based. Right? And that's kind of the whole deal with porn is it's like fantasies. It's like seeing things that maybe you don't get to experience in your own sexual life, or that you would love to experience but it's not possible or something, right? And so like you often will imagine you are that person, or you are in that situation. So it's very off-putting if they have these things that clash some way, or there is bad acting,
right,
or they just, I don't know, like I see a lot of laziness in it that like just, to be honest, I barely even watch it anymore, to be honest, just because it's so bad. And also I found over the years that I have a very creative mind of my own, which I find interesting, because I think that's come later in life, and I think that's come more from me opening up with my creative endeavors and doing that. I never thought I'd be talking about this. This is mad. I always get awkward talking about these things, but yeah, this feels
everyone
like,
does.
In the context of like what we're talking about, it actually sounds like a decent conversation to have. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I don't like typical conversations like this, like crude, like, you know, like the lads talking. Like, I don't like that. I've never been that type of guy. But I will say that, like, I think it's a fun conversation to have. And as you said before, with this idea that like no one is normal and no one is weird, or you know, the reverse is true as well. Yeah. I think there's a lot of truth in that, and it surprises me that people get so up in arms, are like, oh, how could you suggest that, right? When there's just so much craziness out there. You know, like, okay, for example, the foot fetish thing that people seem to have, right? I don't get that. I think it's odd, but I don't like hold that against people that might have that. Like, I just think, you're into what you're into. Like, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone.
Yeah.
What's the issue?
It's like the difference between a fetish and a paraphilia. Like, the fetish is, I like my lady friend to wear a particular shoe in the bedroom. The paraphilia is, I break into a department store and jerk off into the shoes. Like, as long as we don't cross that line, like, we're good. Like, it's healthy. It's fine.
Oh, man.
So, no, that's like, as long as we're not like crossing those. And I will say, though, it is like, if we are looking at something like distress over your sexuality, then we need to start asking questions and perhaps pursuing like a counseling or like an openness and like start exploring what's going on. But I worry a little bit, like, this is going to sound counterintuitive, but I feel like we're moving into a very sexually closed age. In a lot of ways. We are getting, particularly in the research, we're getting very wrapped up in like medicalizing a lot of stuff right now. So you get a lot of the like pornography addiction research or sex addiction research, and there's some like visceral like researchers out there who just like, it's a thing, this is the most toxic stuff in the planet, blah blah blah.
Pornography is toxic.
Yeah, and I'm like, guys, like, people were freaking out about like comic books in the way that you're freaking out about porn right now. But we have like online movements that are picking it up. So there's this group called NoFap, where they like genuinely believe that they're addicted to pornography, and so they try to, you know, quit it cold turkey, and they use their Reddit board as a way to,
I've heard about that.
So, and there's been some recent research that the more you engage on that Reddit board, the more likely you are to relapse. But even like the addiction model in of itself does not really account for pornography or sexual addiction, which is why you don't get pornography or sexual addiction, say like the DSM, for example. Like, it's not an official diagnosis yet. And there's some interesting research that's starting to show that the people who have porn addiction or compulsive porn behavior, they don't track similarly in their frequency. So you could watch one video a week and feel like you're addicted just as much as someone who watches like 6 hours a week or like 24 hours a week. Like the level of distress is the same in perception. And the only thing that predicts it is believing that what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
And so you don't even have to be like, say, like religious, but just to have that like, oh, what I'm doing is wrong in the back of your head, or as a part of, it's called moral incongruency. And
I
that
still
is,
have that for some reason.
yeah.
It's odd.
So,
I mean, do you know what I mean? I live by myself. Do you know what I mean? I'm a fully fledged adult. Like this is. I think the thing that always used to make me feel like it was wrong, like obviously when I was, you know, living with my parents many moons ago. Obviously, it's the thing of like, oh, I wouldn't want to get caught. Wouldn't want to get, you know.
right.
But then when you move out and you become an adult and everything, it's like you do what you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's always that thing of like, I kind of, okay, this sounds stupid now, but like, I kind of grew up with that idea that like only a select few watch porn and like only disgusting people watch it. And like I didn't like actually, I didn't rationalize it in my, I didn't like actually think that way, but I had like a sort of like a feeling that that was the case. And then when I kind of found out, and I would talk to people, friends, girls more specifically, when I found out that women watch porn, that kind of shocked me. But then at the same time, I was like, well, of course. Like, who says it's only a male thing? And like, obviously, the statistics tend to show that it's more predominantly men. But at the same time, you know, plenty like people watch it together, couples watch it together. You know, it's and I think that obviously a lot of that is just, you know, history, things changing. Obviously, you know, over time it's become more and more acceptable. And now, you know, we've entered an age where it's much more just open, like it's something that people freely talk about, and it's not
hyper accessible.
Right, exactly. But I think that whole feeling of like it being a wrong thing comes from the fact that we seldom talk about it. I mean, even myself, like I don't. It's the one thing I don't talk. Like this is the first time I've ever spoken about this publicly, right? And obviously, like there are still things that I'm not really willing to discuss, like personal to me. But
I'm giving you institutional coverage by being an academic.
Yeah. But
it's respectable.
But here's the thing: like, I don't think there's anything disrespectful about talking about those things. But at the same time, I have this thing, and I think that's just the old-fashioned part of me that's like, certain things you should just keep for you, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't. At the same time, I don't judge people that talk about that. If you know what I mean.
Right.
It's a weird thing. It's like for me personally, it's a private thing. You know, I'm happy to talk about what we're talking about because this is like talking about from a psychological perspective. And I think conversations like this should be spoken about. I think it's very important. It's interesting research. But when it comes to that private element, like, you know, your likes, your dislikes, these things, I don't know. Like, I've never spoken about that. Like, I could probably count on my fingers how many times I've spoken about that, and I always get like, you know, the last girl that I had a bit of a fling with, she wanted to ask me about that, and I was like a little schoolgirl in terms of my response. It's so pathetic, but I was just, I don't know, I didn't know how to respond because I was so shy and embarrassed about that because I never speak about it.
Yeah, and you put together your elevator speech.
This is what I like. This is what I don't like. Deal with it. I don't know, man. That's just funny.
So, you know, that I think the conversations are healthy. I worry a little bit about the medicalization and like forcing like addiction models into sexuality. But I also think that there's this interesting like paradox with it too. So like sex is just paradoxical all over the place. You know, more people are talking about porn, more people are watching porn, more people have access to porn. The algorithmic nature of the internet pushes you into different genres and fetishes, and so people are learning more about themselves and their likes and dislikes. But at the same time, we are in an age of like the lowest sexual frequency ever.
You mean like for asexual people and stuff like that? Or?
Like not even asexual people, just people not having sexual partners. So like if you were born in the 90s in the United States, you were like way more likely to not have had a sexual partner outside of high school than like the boomers.
Wow. Why? What?
Yeah.
Why? Do you know that does have you found out why according to the statistics? Is it?
I mean, well, the stats tell us what. They don't really tell us why. We can like culturally guess why. People are, living at home more after the financial crisis. So it's a little bit harder to get it on when your bedroom's next to your parents. There's also some issues with like finances too. So like if you can't afford like a smartphone, how are you going to get on Tinder to find a sexual partner? If you're from like a rural community and everybody moved out to the big city to get work because there's no jobs in your community anymore, like, are you going to have that, high school fling turn into a marriage now? People are putting off getting married. People are putting off having kids. And then with COVID, like our frequency has dropped even more.
Yeah, but that's gonna as soon as we get out of lockdown, it's gonna be crazy, man. It's gonna be more.
I would say yes, but we were already down a downward trajectory to begin with. So it's not like we were like peaked and then we dropped and now we're gonna like react like we were already sliding.
Come on, man. You keep people caged for such a long and like look, we are, if nothing else, animals. Okay.
Right.
And I mean, I've understood this more over the year. Like, I think when I was younger, I used to downplay sex. I thought, like, oh, it's not something that people really need. No, you absolutely need it, but I don't think
absolutely.
But I think it's more to do with like, it's like a release. I put it in the same category as like gym training or boxing or like
it's a basic need.
Yeah, it's like something you need. You need something as a form of release to kind of get, I don't know, frustration out of your system or anxiety or whatever. And it's good. It's a good release. It's euphoric. It's, it's the same as, like I said, when you do exercise and you get the endorphins released into your system. It's the same thing. It's literally the same thing. You actually get that when you climax and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, I understand that. And I also think that it's so damaging if you don't have that. And you're in a situation like we're in now where you can't meet anyone. You don't have that luxury. So that's why I think when things go back to normal, you're going to see a sharp rise, because
I hope so. I really, really hope so. I'm not optimistic, but I hope so, because people need to get laid and they're not. Even before COVID, they weren't. So that's something that's the paradox here that I'm like, like obviously I don't follow the addiction model of porn that it like ruins your life and makes you, like an incel. But also there are more incels and people are watching more porn. So like on a social cultural level, I'm like, okay, this kind of makes sense. On an individual like porn consumption level, I'm like, it's probably not actually addiction. So that's like the disconnect that I'm trying to grapple with recently, is figuring out like where's that line and how do these two things relate to each other.
You mentioned incels. Like, what do you know from your research about incels? Because I've done a little bit of stuff, research into this. I know, well, I say research. It sounds silly saying that to a professor, but I know a little bit about it, and I've kind of reasoned based on what I've understood about it. But like, what have you discovered about it? Like, what are the main things that you can say is like factual based on stats? Like, is
I mean, it relates back to what I've been talking about. Like, I'm not surprised that they exist by any means. Like, if you are, a dude from like that rural community, everybody moved out of town to the city to get a job. You stayed in town. You're working at the Walmart or UPS or Uber or whatever, and you live with your parents. Like, obviously, you're going to have a harder time finding a romantic partner. And then, so one of the things that I find really interesting about them is that they believe in hypergamy, or like the sexual marketplace.
Okay.
And so they conceptualize sexuality as like essentially a meat market, where, you try to get the most attractive person you possibly can. You weigh the pros and cons, like the investment model of it. It's very like calculated and capitalistic. And relationships aren't like that, but that's a perfect reflection of the way like Tinder or Grindr, or Plenty of Fish or other dating apps work, where you literally turn yourself into a commodity in order to find a romantic partner.
never thought about it that way. Yeah, you're
So,
right. Yeah.
you know, like the picture is your like product design. You fill out all of your information, and then people have to click through and compare you to other people. And so,
I
like,
gave up on that. I had Tinder for like
oh,
a year, and I like literally never got likes ever. I think I got like
mhm.
3 or 4. I started conversations, people never got back. I just gave up. I was like, clearly, I'm just not meant to get a partner. This is not
Well,
happening.
there's a weird gender gap in Tinder too, in all dating apps, where women receive a bunch of messages and a bunch of matches.
Yeah.
And because men have to compete for attention within that context. And so if you are not sending a, hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? To like 30 women, 40 women, 80 women, you're probably only gonna get like 2 or 3 that respond to you because their inbox is constantly getting refreshed with new messages that are pushing yours down.
Damn.
So, you know, you've already missed out on people you've matched with because they're matching with everyone.
Yeah.
And so when you're from the perspective of, say, the incel who's trying to find someone because there's no one within their context for them to date, and their message just keeps getting pushed down, and they think they're being rejected when the woman has actually no idea who they are, and they probably never even saw your message. So it's not like she's like looking at you going, oh, you're terrible. Nah. Like your message is literally getting shoved down by other men. You get the impression that the woman has rejected you. And when you're in the context of the dating app where your profile is your, you know, that's where the goods are in that sort of situation. So if you have any sort of body dysphoria or any sort of low self-esteem, like you're going to notice all the bad stuff. So they get into this like weird craniology where like they get hyper obsessed with like brow ridges and jaw lines and like noses. And they've started actually, like in California, there's been some reports of an increase of masculinization surgery, plastic surgery,
Oh, interesting.
to get like stronger brow ridges and stuff. So that way they're more attractive on dating apps and online.
Wow, that's scary.
So
That's
even our
actually
like sense
terrifying.
of like attraction is shifting into like a very 2D digital space too. So I understand why incels exist. Like it does not surprise me whatsoever, and they're having a hard time. They're blaming the wrong people, obviously.
Yeah, I mean,
But I definitely understand the struggle.
I understand the frustration, but the problem is always because I remember I did a video about incels over a year ago, and oh my god, did I get hate for that?
Oh,
And
I'm sure.
the thing is, I didn't even attack them or anything. I literally just looked it up because I knew nothing about it before then. You know, I'd
Mhm.
heard these terms like simp, incel, and I was like, what is this? So I wanted to do my research and obviously make it into content, right? And I literally just read everything there. And the only
Yeah.
thing that I mocked, which, okay, maybe I shouldn't have done. It's not really on brand for me anymore these days. You know, I tend to, if I ever mock anything, it'll be like businesses and stuff these days.
Mhm.
But back then I mocked this idea that incels get angry and blame, because it's mostly men that tend to be
Right.
incels.
Yeah.
And they'll get angry and they'll blame the women, and they'll get aggressive because, okay, this is a thing that I read. It said that they feel that they're owed or being denied something that's owed to them. This idea that you're
Mhm.
entitled, it's entitlement of a relationship, of sexual gratification, etc. And that just hit me the wrong way. I was like, what do you mean entitlement? What do you mean this is something you deserve? Like, you have to work for it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't really get much attention, if ever. I'm like a ghost these days, right? But when I was younger, I had relationships, I've had long-term relationships, I've had my fun, blah, 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 right? So that's where the confidence element is there. I was like, look, if I'm never desired ever again, at least I'm happy, I'm okay with that, right? And I think the biggest thing for me was the relationships that made me feel and understand things a lot better. So now
Mhm.
I'm just easy, I'm relaxed about it, right? But at no
Mhm.
point did I ever feel like I was owed something. Like if a woman rejected me, I didn't suddenly get angry and be like, screw you,
Right.
and like, oh, how dare you not like me? It's like you get rejected a million times. That's just life. It could be,
Right.
and it might not even be anything to do with you. It could be based on several factors. But
Mhm.
and bringing it back to why I understand to some extent, if you've never had any kind of sexual relationship, affection, love, anything like that. So you don't even know what it feels like. I can understand why it would be so difficult and why you would get angry and frustrated. But like for you guys that are incels, like the women are not your enemy. Do you know what I mean? It's not their fault. It's not like they don't owe you anything. And then also just in life in general, life owes you nothing. You got to work for everything you have, like everything, be it relationships, jobs, opportunities. You got to work for that shit. Nothing is getting given for free ever. So just accept and work.
And to be fair too, like the egalitarian relationship is rather new as well. Like the way that relationships are now forming, where it is that egalitarian equal partner like as a norm and then as a social expectation, that's still super new, and we're still figuring that out, how to,
but you still got to work for it though, even though we're equal and we have
but we don't have a blueprint in the way that, say, like your 50s housewife and like, you know, working man had. So we can't really rely on our culture to give us cues on how to be in relationships right now. So we're actually having to work a little bit harder than, like, say, people in the past did when they could just rely on the norm. And also we're putting more stock into like self-actualization needs with our romantic partners now too, and not just like economic or social, or, you know, we're adding that like little existential layer to our relationships too right now. So we're kind of in growing pains too. So I don't want to say that like the incel phenomenon is going to be here forever. I doubt it. I think we need to develop our cultural norms, and people will start shifting on a smooth path, because I think we're in flux. I think we don't know. We're all running in different directions, and we don't know exactly what we're doing at the moment. We don't have a society that reinforces a specific kind of relationship yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't understand. And the thing is, like, there's so much more to life than just relationships and physicality. That's something that I've realized. Like, I think I've been single now like 3 years, something like that. And, you know, I mean, you learn to accept the situation as it is. You have to. You can't get anything else other than that. Like, that is your situation, right? And I think the last time I had any kind of physical relation with someone was about a year ago now. It was very brief. And I remember thinking, like, you don't like need this. It's a desirable. It's something you know, you feel better. It makes everything better. Like, to be loved, to be wanted, and to have that for someone else is ideal. You know, and same with sex. It makes you feel good, makes them feel good. Everyone's happy. Everyone's, you know. But there is so much more to life than that. But because those incels are so obsessed with something they've never had, I mean, that's basic human psychology. We always want and lust after what we don't have. We're never satisfied, seemingly. We always want the next thing. We want more money. We want bigger house. We want faster car. You know, it's always more. And it's very rare you meet people that are like, you know, oh no, I'm happy with this. I'm happy with this. And like for me, you know, I'm not in the ideal situation I want to be in life, but I'm, for the first time in many years, happy with how things are, because I've kind of learned to accept like the small things, the little things, and stuff like that. And I feel like those incels would be better off if they would try to do that a bit more. And also, reverse psychology, you become more attractive by doing that. The happier you are, the more positive energy you put out into the world, and just in general, the more people will be attracted to you, because nothing is more of a put off than someone who's a miserable, lazy, negative asshole. Like, no one wants that. You know what I mean? There's nothing attractive about that. You want the person that's bubbly. You want the person that's full of life, full of energy, because you just want to be like, damn, I want to be around them. What are they smoking? Like, why are they so happy? And that's, do you know what I mean? I think.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I will say, for people who are listening who are kind of like, okay, yeah, but that sounds fake. Like, you are going to have to fake it till you make it. Like, that's kind of the key. You have to practice being that person. You don't just become that person. You shouldn't just, you know, it's not something that comes from within. You have to practice being that person. It's a skill set that you have to develop. So
I partially disagree with you on this.
If you're being like, you know, like, if you're like, hey, I'm, you know, pretty much a downer, I need to go out and smile more, eventually the smile will come naturally. You just have to practice it.
Here's where I disagree with you on this. I agree with this concept that you need to aspire to be this person, right? And that takes work. I agree with that element, but I disagree with the whole fake it till you make it thing, because I think people can see through that. You can tell when someone's bullshitting, when they're trying to be something they're not. Like, I think, and I've heard a lot of people say this, especially coming out of relationships, and I've experienced it myself. When you really start to sit and just spend time, firstly repairing, but also just learning, thinking, spending time by yourself. And not enough people spend enough time on their own after breakups or when they're unhappy. And because of that, they never sort of iron out these issues. And they never really, because everything comes from within, 100%. Every issue you have, every problem you have is from within. It has nothing to do with the situation around you, unless it's like an external thing that's ruining your life. Like, I don't know, Joey, that's
not like COVID.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, perfect example. But generally speaking, most situations are from you. You know, you whatever you put out into the world, that's what you're going to get back. You know, whatever you think, that's what you're going to get back. And also the way you perceive everything in your life, that comes all from within. No one's going to come around and change that. Like, I know this because I used to be a negative person many, many years ago. I was Mr. Negativity. I was young. I hated life. Everything was terrible. Right. And the only thing that was able to change that was me changing the reality of my life. So going to university, you know, quitting this job I hated, taking opportunities where I didn't before. For instance, a big example, if someone gave me advice, and this is more of a recent one in more recent years that I've learned to do, when someone would give me advice years ago, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. Okay, see if that works. Yeah, like, that's not going to work. But did I try it? Did I ever try that thing that they said? Whereas now I'm like, I haven't tried it before. Let's give it a go. Let's see what happens.
Right.
You know? And even things I've tried before and it hasn't worked. Now I think maybe it'll work this time. Maybe there was something I did wrong last time. Maybe it'll work this time. That is how you do it. You change your perception. You change your outlook on life, your mindset, and then that's when you can become that person that I'm talking about. But I think you need to spend that time initially by yourself, working on that, creating that person, and then you sort of quote unquote debut it when you're ready to debut it. But you can't I disagree on this idea that you should go out when you're not ready. I think that whole fake it till you make it thing, like, I get that concept, but I just
I think I'm thinking about it in the long term more so than the short term. So like, if you're like, I'm like, you know, sour, depressed, moody, I'm going to go out tonight and pretend to be happy. It's not going to go well.
Yeah.
It's not going to go well for weeks. But one of the things about like the self, for example, like, I partially disagree with you. I don't think that it's all internal. This is just kind of my like social psychology. Like, we can manipulate your personality depending on what context you're in. So, you know, like, a part of being a human is your relationship, like that space between you and other humans, and like how you inhabit that space. And so in order to be social, you have to learn to be social. And so you can coast on your sourpuss mood, you know, and like, that's real easy. That's a behavior that you already know. That's a system that you're used to. But you have to learn a whole new different way of being socially if you're going to be the happy person. You have to inhabit a different space. And so you can't, you know, sit at home and like, I'm happy, let's debut. You actually have to go in, put yourself in that situation and fail a lot, and then learn and then craft it while you're there. But you have to do it obviously sincerely. If you're going out and like, I'm going to trick them into thinking I'm a good person, you're not going to succeed. You have to be genuine with that training.
I should clear something up with that. Yeah, like, when I said that, what I meant was like, to get to the point where you're comfortable kind of going out and kind of like, and easing it. So like, okay, you might smile and still be depressed inside, be sad inside, right? I've been there, right? But the important thing is that you're thinking, I'm trying this, this could work. Like your mindset is changed. You're not going out and thinking, oh, this is pointless, it won't work, it will be terrible. You're thinking, you're being positive. You're thinking it might work, it could happen, it could this. Like, I think the feeling element comes later when you start to realize, because it was the same for me,
Oh,
dude.
yeah.
Like I would totally, especially when people would give me advice and they'd be like, yeah, just try it, you'll ease into it, things will get better. I just be like, yeah, all right, yeah, okay, we'll see about that. But it was only till
it does.
It really does, yeah. But it takes time, I think, to get there, and it takes even longer for you to then feel that that's right, and feel that that's, and also feel, as you said, that it's genuine. So when you have that happiness, you feel that it's genuine, and you're not actually just hiding something.
Yeah, when it's automatic, it feels genuine.
Right. Yeah.
So you just have to move it into the automatic, so you don't actually have to consciously think about it. So,
what would you say are some common misconceptions about psychology and being a psychologist?
The number one thing that I get all the time is, oh my gosh, you're a counselor, you help people. I'm like, no, I don't do that. There is no session with Mr. Thomas. So that's the number one misconception, is that people blend counseling and psychology. So counseling is the art and the craft and the science of working one-on-one and doing talk therapy with someone. Psychology is the science of studying human behavior. So I'm more analogous to like a natural scientist than I am, say, a counselor, because I observe the world, I develop hypotheses, I set up research paradigms, and I test them. So that's the number one misconception I get. And obviously, like, lots of Freud. People throw a lot of Freud at me. Was it actually my mother? Do I have penis envy? Like that kind of stuff. Is my unconscious telling me something? So, that's, and I don't dig on Freud. I don't agree with Freud's like one-on-one. It's kind of like the idea of like sex addiction. Like, I don't agree with it on the personal level, but like culturally, I think Freud has been huge in like describing Western culture in a way that like is very clear and makes sense. So you said you were very interested in marketing. Are you familiar with Edward Bernays?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So like, genius, crazy, but he was Freud's nephew and took Freud's theories to, convince women that it was both fashionable to smoke and that they should wear green.
I will add as well,
feminist thing.
Yeah, Freud hated that.
Yes.
He hated that. He was like, how can you use my theories for financial gain? This is totally unethical and against everything I'm doing. And Bernays was like, just listen, chill out. This will work. This will make, because I think at the time, Sigmund Freud was in a difficult financial situation as well. So he had to rely on Bernays. And obviously Bernays was just straight marketeer, sales guy. So he's just like, he's thinking,
what did he call it? Like engineered consent. So, but the question though is did psychoanalysis talk therapy last, or did Freud's theories channeled through that social cultural lens into marketing last? Because we still have very sexy toilet paper commercials.
I think we're just very basic. Like I was saying this the other day to someone, how it bothers me that marketing affects us in such a, okay, like, here's what I mean. You ever notice how, like, when you're watching adverts, like, they never speak the way that people normally speak? And that's designed and engineered on purpose. A lot of it, like, if you watch a baby commercial, it has a soft tone. That's designed to kind of put you in the mood, in the frame of mind. I get that. But when we're talking, like, I don't know, just your average, like, you're being sold, I don't know, so phones, and they're like, oh, come now and get 80% off the latest iPhone 6. And it's like, but they speak like that, right? That high pitch, but no one in real life really speaks like that, in that kind of high, kind of constantly rapid, constant energy. Like, people, do you know what I mean? You have little bursts of energy, then relax, then up and then down again, right? No one speaks perpetually like that. And yet that type of marketing has never changed consistently is like that. I mean, you do get, don't get me wrong, you do get adverts that are a bit more different tack. They'll be a bit more slower. You know, if you have like a car advert, it's calm. It's like the new BMW. It's very slow.
Right.
And in the mood, right? But a lot of most advertising is this kind of fast, high pitched, you know, marketing voice, sales voice, but no one speaks like that. And it amazes me that it works. I think that's the bigger thing. Not the fact that it exists, the fact that it works. I got like when it first came out in the 40s, 50s, whatever, right? 50s, 60s, that, you know, it was a new era, it was a new age, it'd never been done before, right? I get that. But then there wasn't that perception necessarily that it was fake. They probably just thought and felt like, oh, someone's talking to me. Oh, that sounds good. Right. Now we all know that it's just fake as hell, and it's not even worth listening to, and it's like annoying, if anything. But it amazes me that after all this time, it can still kind of work, if you know what I mean. Like, and it amazes me that we still do that in that format, in that way. If you know what I mean. It just,
oh yeah, I mean, don't fix what's not broken.
Right, but how does it still work on us? I mean, if anything, it just when I see that, it just bothers me. I'm just like, well, I'm never going to buy that product because that's just annoying. Like, why would you pay for that crappy advert? Like,
well, I'm sure you would. I'm sure you're aware, but you know, have shift a little bit in marketing, so it's very algorithmic and individualized now. So like, it's not that you're just getting generic car commercial. It's you're getting the car that your phone heard you talk about last week.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's understandable. But I'm just talking the adverts in general.
Yeah, but like, I mean? Yeah, if it's not targeted, it's not working.
But even when it is targeted, like, yeah, I'm aware of that. I know that I'm being advertised everything that, you know, my phone is hearing me say. And that, if anything, it just makes me laugh. But when I actually see the adverts as they are, I'm just like, well, okay, like, for example, you know, when I was in Estonia, I'd sometimes talk about my website and the website that I used, which was Wix, right? And so then I got a bunch of adverts in Russian about Wix. Now, Estonians don't speak Russian, they speak Estonian, but there are a bunch of, there's a large proportion of the population that are Russian speaking, right? So obviously when my computer, phone, whatever heard me say Wix and I was in Estonia, it was like, right, we're going to flood him with like 500 million Russian adverts about Wix. And it was like, oh. And now I've spoken about this so much on my computer. Now I'm going to get a ton of adverts for Wix.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's just like, it pisses me off. It's just like, well, you know, I'm not interested in this. You know what I mean? It never advertises things that I'm interested in. If anything, it's weird. Like, you know, I've seen...
And creepy and unsettling.
Yeah. Like, have you ever seen like some of the stuff that they advertise on Facebook through Wish? You've seen wish.com stuff?
Oh, I've seen Wish, yeah.
Those adverts will always kind of confuse me because, like, they're not targeted in any way. They don't have anything that is anything that I would want, that I've even spoken about. And, like, some of it's just odd. Like, really odd stuff that, like, some of it would be, like, sexual, right? Right. But it'll be, like, really weird sexual stuff. Like, not like, something you would even buy. It's like just odd. Like it like might resemble something you've seen before, but it's like a really either cheap version or just like really odd version. Or it'll be something that's like, I don't know, like if it's a desk lamp, it would be like a desk lamp, but it's like missing half the pieces or something, or I don't know. It's very strange.
Yeah, they're trying to like target. I think it's because we're millennials, maybe. They're like, oh, the millennials will think this is cool. It's deconstructed, or alternative, or hipster. So it might be tagged in a little bit of a way, but I think they're like broad brushing it. They're like, oh, you are in this age category. We're going to give you like partially deconstructed lamp.
One thing I didn't ask you about earlier was with regards to your students, like what is the whole sort of spectrum of feedback you've received, good and bad? Like, and because I'm interested in finding out that, because you seem like you'd be a good professor, so I'm sure like a lot of it's like mostly positive, but I'm interested to hear what the negative would be as well.
Most of it is positive. I usually get really good customer service satisfaction survey results. Most of the negative, and this isn't even like necessarily negative. I mean, it's obviously uncomfortable, but I teach a psychology of death and dying course.
Mhm.
And, like when you have a big class, like obviously someone is going to have lost a loved one that's
Right.
for them. Sometimes it's that semester, sometimes it's the like summer before, and then they go to this death class. And so like I have to keep like an open door policy, like, hey, you're going to be very uncomfortable in this class. So if you need to leave, you can leave. And so I regularly have people coming in and out of that classroom who
Mhm.
have to go out into the hallway because they can't handle a particular topic or video that I'm showing because it's just hits way too close to home. Um, but overall, like students really enjoy that class and they get a lot out of it. And I think that's the most like friction that I have felt with the student body is that like, because I don't, you know, based on this conversation, like I don't go soft, I don't cover anything up. And so when we talk about death, we talk about death. And
Right. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's not like, I'm not very sensitive. I mean, I try to be sensitive, obviously, but I don't like euphemize anything. Um, and so that's where I get a lot of problems. And then just general workload amount. I make my students do a lot of work. I follow this researcher. She's the graduate dean at Flinders University in Australia. Her name's Tara Brabazon, and she is like a goddess of like teaching and scholarship. Like I just cling on to every word she says. And so, but a lot of what she does in her work and in her teaching is very hands-on. It's very active. It's a lot of work, but every single class that I have, like students always leave with like their own little miniature, like original contribution to knowledge. Um,
Cool.
Never like I never do multiple choice tests. I hate that. They always leave with a finalized project of like, hey, I learned about all sorts of things, but I really learned about this thing. Um, and so I obviously get complaints about like, why are there so many papers? Why do we have to do this? This is so much work. I had to read so much. And I'm like, well, welcome to university. Because I have to read everything that you're reading too. So, and there's
Yeah.
like 30 of y'all. So that's generally it's either a workload or the student needs to leave the class because we get too heavy in the lecture.
Tell us some things about the academic world that the average person doesn't know.
Um, Generally, professors are more like me in this room than people think. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
like they act very stuffy. There's a weird power dynamic relationship when you're the undergrad and they're the professor. But like if you go to an academic conference, I went to one in Portland, Oregon before COVID. And we went to a bar like immediately afterwards and got sloshed.
Cool.
It was way cool. And we just talked about like it was with the sex researcher like section of the conference. And so we just like went to this Elvis themed bar in a basement and just got sloshed. And because it was Portland, like typically if you're at a conference, like the researchers and professors will come out and they'll like all light their cigarettes between sessions. But Portland is marijuana legal, so like they were lighting like joints right outside the convention center.
Wow.
So they're very normal, very weird people who do very normal and weird things. So that is the
Yeah.
thing to keep in mind with professors is that they put on airs, but there's
Yeah.
definitely like that's a front because a
That
lot of
was
them too are like socially anxious. So
yeah.
it's also a guard because like I have horrible social anxiety. I don't know why I chose this career path because I have to publicly speak like every day.
That was something I always found very interesting when I was at uni. I guess I just came across well because I found it weird when my professors would start talking to me like I was their peer because I was like, well, I'm just some shitty undergraduate, right, who knows nothing. You're a
Mm-hmm.
professor. Why are you talking to me like I know something, like, And I guess maybe it was because I've always had that fascination with having these types of conversations and learning and stuff. And for instance, there's even professors who like there's one professor who remembers me like through LinkedIn, right? And I even see him like liking some of my stuff, and I'm like, wow, like that.
You're a real human.
That to me is like the ultimate honor, because I studied under him. So like if he likes my stuff, I feel like, oh my god, he likes my stuff. Like I feel so proud. But at the same time, I'm like, why would he be interested in this in the slightest? Like, yeah, I just make some podcast and stuff, and he's like he's professor in his
oh
field,
yeah,
you
no,
know?
we're all losers. Like that's the one thing you need to know. We're all losers.
I think
who don't know what we would be doing with our lives if we
You're
weren't in
being
academia.
mean to yourself. Come on, nah, that's not. No, I've seen some cool professors in my time. That does exist. That does
absolutely.
Exist.
So
you give off the cool vibe. You give off the cool vibe. I'm thinking your students are leaning more towards the cool side, because it's not just about like who the person is. It's how they interact with people and like. Yeah, like we said earlier in the conversation, how they make it more interesting, or how they make students feel comfortable. I mean, look, you know, talking about sex is never a thing that's really going to be comfortable for a lot of people. So there's a way you can do that and a way you can't do that. And I would say the fact that you're very open with this and you just push it and make people feel comfortable, it's going to make people feel happy, because people want to know more about it. They just don't know how to communicate that. They're worried about it because it's an uncomfortable conversation to have. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, you just need to learn how to talk about it without making it hyper personal.
Exactly.
I don't need to know what you like or do, but we can still talk about it.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to talk more about your research. So what would you say, like, because we've already kind of explored a lot of it already, but what would you say are like the key things that you've kind of discovered through your research into human sexuality?
That straight people are just as weird as the rest of us.
Okay. Well, this is interesting. This implies something. So is there like a perception that non-straight people are more like adventurous in the bedroom or something? Or
so straight people are typically treated as like a default in research. So there's a big issue with like who the comparison group is. Like, so it's how are gays compared to straight people? How are women compared to men? So there's like a social dynamic that goes into research design. And so a lot of my research flips the script a little bit, and I like specifically research straight people, particularly straight men. Because they're just kind of treated as like this background, like control group, like, oh yeah, we just collected some straight men and then we're going to compare them to the gays, or we're going to compare them to the women, or what have you. And so like my thesis and dissertation specifically go into, you know, like how are men constructing sexual knowledge? Like how are they reporting their sexual behaviors? How are they identifying? How are they, you know, what is the, how similar or dissimilar are they? And it's varied. Like you can't just treat straight men as a monolith like we often do in research. Like we put them on like this like default monolith pedestal, kind of, not even a pedestal because it's not like a, you know, a privilege necessarily to be the default, because then you're nondescript as an individual. And so so a lot of my research focuses in on how straight men are, and how varied it is, and how you can't treat it as a, you know, a default group. Like if you specifically want to study it, great. And so that's kind of the area that I'm trying to open up and do some masculinity studies in that area. And I do that because it's a lot easier to study something that you are kind of distant from. So like I'm gay, for example. I've done some gay research, but I find that, you know, the personal perceptions and experiences and like trying to keep that like, you know, straightforward research mindset is a little difficult. So I do a little bit there, but not a lot. It's a lot easier to look at a group that I'm not a part of and be like, oh, this is how y'all are moving. This is what y'all do.
Would that be like research bias for you then?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because it's a conflict of interest because you're closely identified to it. So it's
and there is room for that kind of research. Like you can take your personal lived experience and use that as like informative to study. But like if I'm studying consensual non-monogamy as a monogamous person, like obviously I have monogamy biases against them that, you know, like may or may not be there. But I
Yeah,
can be
and
more objective than if I'm in like the midst of consensual non-monogamy and I can't see the forest or the trees.
because I remember like when I was studying psychology at a very young age, I remember hearing about this thing where psychologists would often even not pursue their research anymore, or would like skew the results or whatever, based on the fact that they found something that conflicted either with what they were trying to do, or that they just weren't happy with. So I'd imagine, like in the scenario that you gave, let's say you were studying gays as the group, and then you found something that you didn't like finding out, if you know what I mean. So it's like, oh, this goes against not only the research I'm trying to do, but it's also just not flattering, I don't know, from a personal perspective or something. But then that would present an issue. So I suppose it's more logical to then study different groups, because as you said, you can be more objective, and then that's not going to affect your research in any way.
Right. I mean, it still will affect the research. You're never going to get rid of bias, but I think the bigger problem with what you were talking about is not so much that like that conscious, like, oh, I found this, I don't like it. Like,
no, well, I'm using
it.
very silly, like, obviously,
but like,
I'd imagine most professors aren't like that. It's like
I mean, some of them are, but it's a little bit more pernicious than just that. So it affects the questions that you even ask, and the options for the answers that people can give. So you may not even come into contact with the information that you don't like, because you've already funneled your participant, like you unconsciously have funneled the participant into a specific answer that you wanted them to say. And so that's where you have to be really careful and, work with the team and have a diverse team with different perspectives and different lived experiences, because they can point those things out to you. Because like your study that failed may have not failed, you may have forgot to add a particular variable that like puts the whole puzzle piece in order, because you aren't thinking about that variable on the outside. So lived experience is helpful in doing research, because it kind of gets you like an inside scoop of like what's going on, but it's also super limiting, because it can, you end up studying a tree instead of the forest,
right,
and limiting your own research. So I find it helpful to study things that I'm not a part of.
What's the biggest life lesson that you've learned so far?
Oh, Lord. It's a lot of trial. Everything is trial and error. And boundaries are important. Boundaries are super important. Boundaries with yourself, with other people, with the things that you do. Like, if you're just swimming through life, it's going to be overwhelming. And so kind of like what we talked about with like being comfortable being by yourself, it's hard to be by yourself if you haven't constructed a situation in which you can be by yourself without other things leaking in. So I think boundaries are like the number one thing. Like, you gotta know when to turn the computer off. You gotta know when to put the homework down. You gotta take your hat off work. You gotta, allow people an appropriate distance to you and how to interact with you. Like, if you let it bleed, you're gonna live in chaos.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, totally agree with that.
Yeah, and that's, I'm fortunate to be in academia, because I got to spend undergrad and graduate school like testing all of that out in a hyper structured space. So, I've had an easier time than say other people have to, test it out and learn how to do it, and get lots of restarts, because sometimes you don't get redos.
Yeah, that's very true.
So, from testing the waters and getting a trial run at life, an extended trial run through my 20s, boundaries are important. Learn to set those, even with yourself.
As we draw things to a close for today, do you have any upcoming projects or maybe some final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah. In terms of projects, I don't have anything particularly exciting. I mean, I am going to start teaching in New Mexico. The school is very open access friendly and centric, and they encourage it. So my website may start getting loaded up with like, hey, you can just take my class online for free. Here are all my resources if you want it. I'm going to figure out how to do that. But the major work that I'm doing right now, particularly online, is with the podcast. So we come out with a new episode every Tuesday or Wednesday. What we do is we cover a open access psychology textbook. but we don't like read the textbook, or like we barely even talk about what's in the textbook, to be honest. We pick a topic that we can use the basic theoretical information from a chapter in the textbook to inform our conversation about the topic, essentially. So the idea is that if you're not reading the textbook, you can listen to our podcast and learn something new. If you're in our class and we've assigned this textbook, you've got additional information that teaches you how to take that psychological theory and apply it to a real world situation. So for example, we're doing an introduction to psychology book right now, and we did on the intelligence testing chapter and like IQ and stuff like that. We talked about how it's that research is like embedded in the eugenics movement in America, and how even like our SAT is remnants of that eugenics movement, and kind of like the overall cultural space that we're talking about when we're discussing something like IQ or standardized testing. Because the book will tell you everything you need to know about like the stats and the nitty gritty, and we would cover that in a lecture. But the podcast is more like, so what? Why do we care about this chapter? What's interesting about this? So sometimes my co-host and I just, go through and we talk about, eugenics or the Myers-Briggs test, or what else have we covered? We've talked about drugs this semester. That was fun. And then sometimes we have guests on. So we've had people on talking about eyewitness memory in the context of like suspect identification and lineups. We've talked about international romance tourism with someone who actually went on tours with men to like what is it? Not Estonia. You went to Estonia. What's the other European country? Where all the mail order brides are from?
That begins with an E?
Yeah. I believe it begins with an E. We're gonna get canceled
me there.
We're gonna get canceled by Eastern Europe. Shoot, I cannot remember. Anyway, the Eastern European mail order brides, the Philippines, and then Colombia as well. So she came on and talked with us about that. So
wow,
it's a good time. We get experts on. Sometimes we ramble. This summer we're going to start going through controversies in psychology and where psychology is not the best, where it does not shine the brightest. So if you're ever interested in, having a justification for hating psychology, tune in this summer.
Well, listen, you've been an absolutely fantastic guest. So I want to say a massive thank you for being on the show. And to all of my listeners, thank you very much for listening to the Christian Reeve Podcast. Make sure to go check out Thomas's podcast. It's called Psychosocial Distancing. And as I always say, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, leave us a follow, leave us a rating. Let me know who you want to see on the show in the future, what you want to hear on the show in the future. And as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.